So what I'll do is I'll just give an introduction to today's event. So our partners Connected Kerb are here for the event, The Future is Electric, Transforming Transport for the NHS. So today's event will start off with an introduction from James Bates, Senior Project Manager at Greener NHS, NHS England and Improvement and the South East region. He's also going to be joined by Claire Felon, Project Manager, Net Zero Travel and Transport Team at NHS England. We'll then be joined by Chris Pateman-Jones, Chief Executive Officer at Connected Kerb, and we will finish off with Vicky Evans, who is NHS and Public Sector Fleet at Connected Kerb. We'll then have a live Q&A, so please do remember to post any questions in the Q&A section. So to kick off today's event, I will hand over to James and Claire.
Cheers, Evie. And I'll just want to do a quick introduction before we crack in. So yeah, James Bates, working for the South East Greener NHS team, one of the 7 regions responsible for delivering net zero strategic and regional level. I'm leading on travel and transport and estates and facilities. So obviously fleet electrification fits quite nicely into those 2 areas. I'll provide the regional view, looking at ICSs and the providers and how they're looking to install EV infrastructure, and I'll just pass on to Claire, who provide the national perspective. Thank you.
I think we might have lost Claire there, James. Claire, can
right at the worst time. I think what we'll do, we'll wait for Claire. I can probably talk through her slides anyway. If you want to head back to the national perspective, that's okay. And then if we get Claire in, then she can take over. Bear in mind, I've not looked or delivered these slides before, but we move on. So Claire works for the national net zero travel and transport team, who are sort of responsible for delivering the strategy and the policy around sustainable travel. This encompasses modal shift, active travel, looking how our staff and our patients commute and travel into our sites, but also obviously looks at fleet electrification. You may have seen at COP26 last year, it was our sort of first ever electric ambulance on show, grabbed a lot of headlines in it. It just shows to the world that we can make these changes. So the current picture, NHS owns and leases a fleet of over 20,000 vehicles and sort of grey fleet mileage. So sort of cars that are owned by our staff, but obviously used for business services, make up around 250 million miles in secondary care. And if we look at all road travel in the UK, around 5% is from the NHS. So we can have a big impact. And if we can reduce our emissions by sort of traveling to emergencies and seeing patients in the community, then this can obviously improve air quality, and it can also lead to improvements to patient and community health. So the national team have currently conducted a fleet data collection, which essentially asked all 240 trusts throughout the country about their capacity to switch to EVs and what their current fleet was like. And it looks like 60% of trusts have at least one EV charging point available. 24% of trusts have reported that they have sufficient electrical capacity. So there is feasibility. I've got a bit of an echo from someone. If people could be muted, that'd be good. 24% of trusts have reported that they've got a sufficient electrical capacity, so they've engaged the DNO to see whether they can electrify the fleet or whether they need to upgrade. And looking at the basic average mileage, I've just got an email about Claire, it looks like she might have issues joining. Based on average daily mileage, 56 to 77% of vehicles assessed could already be replaced by battery electrical vehicles without an opportunity charging. So clearly that presents the picture that we can electrify our fleet, and working with partners such as Connected Kerb presents an opportunity to do that. Next slide, Evie. So challenges, obviously, I'm sure there's a lot. Where do we start? And I think one area that we're starting on, we're currently conducting a pilot with our ambulance services, looking at zero emission emergency vehicles and conducting analysis to do that. Can staff implement it? What are the impacts? What are the benefits? How much is it going to cost? All of these things are currently being measured and assessed in that pilot. We've got capacity constraints. If you consider the national grid at the moment, it's already completely full. It's 100 years old. We've got to install heat pumps, never mind electrify our fleet. So we've got to have real good conversations with distribution network operators and work through a joined up coordinated approach with our other emergency vehicles. And look, 10 to 15% of trust fleet vehicles are kept at employees' homes. So what are we going to do? How can we encourage them to transition to electric vehicles? And something like car salary sacrifice might be one of those opportunities. Next slide, please, Evie. So some progress, currently delivering and developing a national strategy in collaboration with Cenex. So this is going to look at what trust providers and systems need to do in terms of their overall approach to fleet electrification. We're having engaging consultations with a variety of stakeholders, both from the public and private sector, to develop that strategy. We've done the fleet review, which is the baselining exercise, understand what the as is, so we can then move on to the to be. And then we're also working sort of with resilience and developing a number of tools and resources. Next slide, please. So options and planning. Yeah, Claire, are you in?
If you want me to take over, yes.
Oh, please, you've saved me.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, everybody. My internet was down, and poor James as he's scrambling through my slides. Thank you all. Just very briefly, I'm Claire and I'm working the Net Zero Travel and Transport team at NHS England, and we are a team of 7 who are tasked with decarbonising all aspects of travel and transport across NHS England. So just that little challenge we've got. So just picking up where James left off there, thank you, James. So these are some of the options we've got and some of the planning. So our emergency vehicles, obviously, these are of specialist nature and require rapid turnaround times, but there are a number of options we've got to consider here. And one of the most interesting ones, I think, is the sharing of resources and charges with other organisations, such as the emergency services. So we're looking into sharing this with like the fire services, the police services, but also utilisation of like bus depots. So for the majority, the bus depots are empty during the day, and this is a great opportunity that we could utilise for these emergency vehicles, which would be fantastic. And something else that we're looking at is hydrogen, particularly for the more rural areas and where the ambulances have larger duty cycles. So the future of this is unclear according to the government strategy at the moment, what it will look like in travel and transport, but it is an option that we're watching closely. For our non-emergency fleet vehicles, we anticipate that these will be charged on site overnight at trusts, but we can also use public provisions to cater for the needs of these vehicles as well. So we think that they'll be quite a straightforward aspect of the fleet to decarbonise. And our great fleet then, this is where staff use their own vehicles for business purposes. So we predict that this will follow the public trajectory. And the needs of this will be met through public provision. However, there is one big barrier to this, and that's regional disparity. And if you look at the graph on the right, and hopefully it's a bit bigger on your screens, but London compared to, say, the Northwest, there's huge regional disparity. And until there's more widespread coverage and that levels up a bit, I think we're gonna see that basically it's going to take a bit of time for that to come up. But once that regional disparity is addressed, hopefully we'll see a bit more of the grey fleet changed over to electric. And we're also developing a chapter in our strategy that James mentioned, which will also give some options and guidance around how we encourage people to make more sustainable travel options, whether that's e-pool or e-cargo bikes for business use or things like pool cars as well. Next slide, please. So this is the predicted trajectory, which I just thought was interesting, of the public EV uptake, and it's based on O7 DFT modelling and data. And you can just see there what the forecast looks like for these vehicles, which I thought was quite an interesting visual. Next slide, please. And then just to conclude, so I think really importantly, one thing we can't do is do this in silos, and we don't want to continue to reinvent the wheel time and time again. So collaborative working and a holistic whole systems approach is going to be imperative to this transition, working together in that joined up way. Like we said, the optimization of shared resources. So looking for those opportunities that are already available, and how can we share these resources? How can we do this together? How can we work together in that joined up way so that we have the best outcomes for everybody? The leveling up and tackling of the regional disparity, again, until this is addressed, I think it's going to take a bit longer for the Great Fleet to transition over, but the government, this is key on their radar. So hopefully they're going to start addressing that now in the next coming years, so that we see that transition start to increase more rapidly. And then learning and sharing. And I was at a conference recently, and the take-home message for the conference was that we would all get a lot more done if we stopped worrying about who got the credit for things. I just thought that was so important. And if we work together and we share everything that we learn and throughout this journey, because let's be honest, this is new territory for everybody. We're all doing this together. And I think it's going to be so important that we share our learning and don't reinvent the wheel, save each other time, and let's do it together. Thank you. I'll hand over to James now for his slides.
Cheers, Claire, and thanks for coming back in and save me right the right time. If you can move on to the slide, I'm conscious. I just wanted to provide the regional view, because Claire is obviously in the national team and setting the vision and the strategy, and then I'm working more sort of strategically on how we can implement that at local level, working with systems and providers. I think I want to start off by saying ICS Green Plans are an ultimate opportunity to sort of real drive coordinated, joined up working across our system partners with local authorities and with the NHS. There's no point one local authority installing a substation and the trust 5 miles down the road doing the same. Why don't we work together? And the ICS Green Plan is an opportunity to do that. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to drill a little bit into the data and this fleet return. So this is what we've collated. I know in the southeast where I'm based, we had 100% of trusts that completed it. So we've got a real good baseline to understand what's our fleet like, because if you don't have good data, how can you make informed decisions? These are some of the questions that we asked. So the proportion of low, ultra and zero emission vehicles, but also how many EV chargers are on site and how many might we need if we want to electrify. Next slide, please, Evie. And then we're also working with other networks and other groups to support a more regional view on EV charging. And we're supporting the Transport for Southeast EV Charging Infrastructure Strategy, a bit of a tongue twister, and there's a number of work packages available there, working with key stakeholders. It's important for the NHS not just to work in isolation, we need to drive efficiency, and that can only be done by working in a joined up approach. I think that's all from me, Evie. Again, apologies about the tech issues. If you want to drop me an email, there it is, and we'll be happy to support in some Q&A. Thanks, guys.
Hi, thank you for that, James and Claire. It's great to get your insight, obviously, from a regional and national perspective. I am going to hand over, because I know time is ticking, to the team over at Connected Kerb. So our first speaker is Chris Pateman-Jones. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Connected Kerb. So I'll hand over to you, Chris.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having me, and well done, James, for stepping in there. That was extremely good, and I feel for you also, Claire, because that's difficult when you lose connectivity. Hopefully it won't happen here. Thank you also for the fantastic introductions. It's very rare that Vicky and I get the opportunity to go and talk after someone has basically done the argument for us already, so thank you very, very, very much for that. And I've seen some good questions already coming into the chat. So rather than me sort of convincing everyone about EV, because I think you sort of understand the reason for it, and I don't want to sort of preach to the converted here, I might just sort of step back and tell you the journey the company's sort of come through. So we started the business about 4.5 years ago, and we started it with a view that actually comes in to address one of the questions that's coming from Craig Hodgson, which is about sort of the grey fleet being served by home charging provision. I think that comes to the core of why Connected Kerb exists as a business. So if you own an EV in the UK today, or actually around the world, you pretty much can guarantee that 95% of those people will have a driveway and be able to charge at home on that driveway. And that's because it's the most convenient, affordable and reliable place that they can possibly charge their car. If you don't have a driveway, you have to park on street or in a car park or wherever it might be, it's really difficult to charge. And so essentially the whole business was set up with a view of trying to provide that convenience, affordability and reliability for people who weren't able to charge at home. Now, those people park in lots of places throughout the day, and they park predominantly, the car sits for most periods of time either on residential streets at home where they need a public charging point or at work. And that is why we are so excited about talking to the NHS. So the NHS has a massive opportunity to be a real sort of force for change here. It gets us really, really, really excited. You have an enormous fleet, both in terms of your own vehicles that you operate, but also this grey fleet, and actually also just workplace vehicles. So people, when they're coming to work and parking their cars, often because of the sort of employment profile of people who work in the NHS, they are often those people who live in places where they do have to park on street. They don't have big sort of detached houses with nice off-street sort of parking places. They are often living in locations where they are reliant on public charging. So there is a real opportunity for the NHS to serve there. So huge fleet impact. There's the sort of duality of this where there's a massive opportunity to have a positive impact in air quality. And there's also the linkage across to local authorities. So we started off our business with a focus on street residential. That meant our clients were predominantly local councils. They are people you operate and work alongside all the time, and we're trusted by a huge number of those across the UK. We've got some of the biggest contracts in the world actually with local authorities, and they've bought into us because of the way that we try and work in partnership with them, the fact that we care about social inclusion, so we don't always just go and employ or go and deploy in the wealthiest areas where adoption is going to be the quickest, but we try and put the commercial models in place to allow us to deploy and earn our money over a longer period of time. So they're very excited by that, and I think Vicky will talk a little bit about some of those relationships in future. I'd say the important part with all of those is they see us as a trusted partner. That's what Vicky will talk about us trying to be with you. We want to work with the NHS for the long run. We see it as a huge catalyst for change. And I guess to sort of hammer that message home, we've had a really, really big year this year. So we've deployed about, I think we're going to be about 3,500 charging points by the end of this year. That puts us as being, from a standing start at the start of this year, one of the biggest charging networks in the UK, and very rapidly catching up and overtaking BP Pulse. What's different with some of the others is that we've scored as one of the highest performing networks in terms of customer service and reliability, which some of the other large networks have maybe failed a little bit on. That is one of the core things for us. And that's one of the reasons why we had such an amazing result earlier this year. So we are backed by, one of the other reasons why we're maybe different from some of the others you might have seen out there, we're backed by Aviva investors. So a long-term, patient, ecologically and environmentally focused organization that cares about social inclusion. So they're we think, a trusted brand. We, as you might expect, because of the success of the business, we had a lot of interest from investors at the start of this year, and we screened out a number of them. So we haven't taken oil and gas money. We haven't sort of focused on that, and we haven't focused on investors that are interested in us selling the business in 2 or 3 years' time. Aviva are investing for sort of 15, 20-year sort of returns, which matches us as a business as well. So it's been a really big year. Hopefully that gives you a bit of confidence in us. I've done the easy bit here, and it's now my opportunity to hand over to Vicky to sort of give you the detail on things and tell you a little bit about her history as well. Thank you all for having me.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks very much, and thank you to James and Claire. I think it's great to be able to see what the plans are, and it's great to have the greener NHS in place. Before I joined Connected Kerb, I delivered the NHS energy framework at EDF Energy, and even back then there were conversations around sustainability. So it's great to see that those have moved forward. So I think when I started doing this and investigating around the NHS, it really tied into some of my background experience. So one, understanding the challenges that energy managers, estates managers had across the NHS and the NHS trusts with just being able to budget and manage energy. Then I saw some of the staff, not being replaced and teams becoming smaller, and additions such as EVs and other really massive projects be given to others in roles that were already pretty busy. So it felt like a really great time for me to bring that experience together with my experience of working at some of the other largest electric vehicle providers, such as Swakoma and EO, and bring that together at Connected Kerb with my experience working at Crown Commercial Services and understanding the procurement and the regulations there, and come together and suggest to Chris, we would really love to do something with the NHS to show our support and be able to provide a service which matches your already very busy, very prominent roles that you have. So to start that, the first thing I did was talk with some of my network from EDF Energy and to have a chat with them around what's stopping or what are the blockers that potentially are stopping NHS from being able to electrify their fleet or provide electric vehicle charging for staff and visitors. And it soon became really clear. So what I was told was that there's different stakeholders wanting different things across the sites. There's also the fact that when people and visitors are coming to hospitals, they may not need an EV top up, or it might not seem to be the most important thing. That actually power and the connections that are already available at site are under increasing demand. So potentially any sort of project might be too big and too complex based on the current infrastructure that's there. There's also those concerns around if you're putting in electric vehicle charging stations, then you have to get that balance right between having the right number of chargers, but also ensuring that there is the right number of car parking spaces, and those car parking spaces that are already at a premium are used in the most effective way. And so what we've tried to do there is listen to all of those reasons, be able to look at the greener NHS's plans, and to be able to look at the network and the customers and the experience that we've got and bring that together to be able to provide some ideas and some options around how you may want to start, progress, or continue your EV journey. So for us at Connected Kerb, we've got 5 main trends that we really kind of question ourselves on to make sure that that we are delivering on the products and the services and the solutions that's going to work for today, tomorrow, and into the future. And we think the first one is that these our electric vehicle charging points need to be accessible. They need to be simple to use. They need to be up. They need to be available, because they will essentially help us, local authorities, you and everyone involved in this, to be able to smarten up our cities, to be able to understand more about the CO2 emissions, and to be able to manage our cities better, so that they're cleaner, and therefore we're playing our part into reducing and managing climate emergencies. At Connected Kerb, we pride ourselves and question ourselves with our product development and our delivery team. Are we being the most sustainable? Are we aware of our environment? Do we understand the part we play? And the answer is yes, because we are working all the time to make our chargers more sustainable, using more recycled equipment, and also making sure that we're repurposing our chargers at the end of life so that we're maximizing their use across the board. And also, this market's moving so quickly. So we want to be there for you so that you don't have to keep up with the ever-changing world. So our experts will make sure that we're providing the support, that we're advising customers, we're advising you on what those technological developments are, how they might affect you, and also things to watch out for, whether it be good or a stumble or a challenge for what's coming in the horizon, so that you understand when you make the decisions about EV charging at your site that you're fully briefed and you understand what it is that you're doing. And finally, it's got to be commercially viable. Got to make sure that what you do at your trust is in keeping with the budget and the funding that you've got available to you to be able to achieve this task. And what we've seen is that this approach has worked really well. So Chris talked about our growth, and here are just a few of the highlights about our growth, really, with my favourite one being that as of last week, Connected Kerb had delivered 5 million EV miles, which we're really proud of, because it shows that what we're doing makes sense and is working and is accessible. We're also on target to put 28,000 chargers in the ground by 2023. And those chargers will come from contracts that we've recently won with local authorities like West Sussex, which was 7,000 chargers to work in partnership with the local authority to provide electric vehicle charging in their area. And that's not just putting the chargers in. That's not just installing them, that's managing them, maintaining them, marketing them, working with the communities, providing social value, and making sure that we are integrating ourselves in the right way into those local authorities for what we want to achieve and for what the local authority wants to achieve in terms of clean air. We were really impressed that last week we were confirmed as joint third in the customer service EV drivers recommended ZAP network, and our customers said to us in those independent surveys, they said that they liked Connected Kerb because our chargers were reliable and excellent. And that, amongst everything, just makes us feel really good, because we want to provide something that says, I need a charge, here's a charge, I've charged. Not, I need a charge, this one's not working, that one's not working, I'm now getting a bit stressed driving around to find another one. And our investment from Aviva really shows that we're here for the long run. We've got £110 million to invest, and that really opens some doors for us to be able to achieve our objectives, whilst hopefully being able to achieve yours and others at the same time. So let's have a look at what our products are, because they're a little bit different to others. So what we will look to, we will start our conversations with you or with anyone at the Trust with just 4 really simple questions. What vehicles do you want to charge? How long will the vehicles dwell there? What's the available power that you have on site? And what, if any, budget do you have? Those 4 questions will allow me and the team to be able to start to show our support to you. And what we do, first of all, is we make sure that you can come to all of our masterclasses, and that we can help and coach and educate those that are interested in understanding more around how to get the balance right on those 4 questions. We'll also do some work internally with your staff to make sure they really understand why EVs and the installation of the EVs and the reduction of diesel and petrol cars off our roads is so important. We know that you're busy, and we know that it's difficult to come to site. So initially we'll try to do as much as we can remotely with our in-house infrastructure planner. And they will look at your sites. They'll look at your requirements, they'll look at your vehicles, they'll look at how long they dwell, they'll look at your capacity, and they'll make some suggestions to you. And those suggestions may be to do something quickly, they may be to do something, they may be a long-term plan. But they'll make those suggestions to get you started. We'll then build on those together, and where it seems sensible, we'll come to site and we'll meet with your stakeholders, and we'll look at those sites, and we'll look and see what we would consider as the experts, some options for what your good might look like. And we'll also, really importantly, we'll look at your fleet. We'll look at your fleet, we'll assess and check how many miles are they doing, what's the pattern of their driving, where do they go, how can they charge, and we'll come back to you with some initiatives that will help you to balance the right chargers in the right place for the right outcomes with the available capacity that you've got on site. And I just wanted to slip this slide in because I've had a few people over the last couple of weeks talk to me about their assumed requirement to have 22 kilowatts for those being faster and therefore charging cars faster. This slide just talks about why there's more to life than increasing speed, and faster isn't always better. And I think the important bit here is always remembering that when you're using fast chargers, you're very much dependent on the onboard charging converter of the car. So it's things like that that we'll help you with, and we'll make sure that the fleet that you've ordered or that you're looking to order, we will make sure that we are working on the best chargers to achieve those goals. Because you may have a large charger, 22 kilowatt charger, but actually the transport you have can only charge up to between 7 or 11, and the capacity that you have means that having a 22s may take up all your capacity on site, whereas having 3 7s may be a better option, and then growing and learning and evolving into those faster chargers. So what is our offer? Well, I guess the first thing to say is that we are the only people that we want to look after our chargers. So we don't sell them to any other distributors, and we manufacture them in the UK so that we have a handle on our supply chain. And I think the most important differentiator for us is that we learned quite early on that having, chargers have got a good few components, electrical components, and some of those are easy to break or they can be tampered with. So what we've done is we've put those components, the expensive technical components, we've put them in a sealed box, and we've put them in the ground because that's the safest place for them. We've then used our chargers along the bottom, so our geckos and our chameleons for our stand-up chargers, and our limpets and our scarabs for our wall chargers. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to repair things really quickly. It allows us to be able to take either part away and replace it. So we think that at the moment, our average time to replace or restore power, to restore a charge point where the fault is in the charger, takes us about 45 minutes. Our chargers are OCPP compliant, so they talk the same language as anybody else. They can go onto anybody's back office, and we also have the fact that they are really easy to use with the standard RFID cards. And that's important because then we would like to give you options around also whether you charge for those, and also just open the doors to having different charging structures so that you could differentiate potentially whether you want to charge staff a lower rate, whether you want to charge visitors a concession rate, and whether you may want to open up your chargers in the evenings when demand might be less to be able to provide a charge for residents in the nearby area. Also, it's really important when thinking about charging is getting the balance right between the number of chargers that you have, the capacity that those might need, and the time constraints and administration required to increase the availability that you'd have on site. So we have load managing based via our software. And what that allows us to do, it allows us to give you options where potentially you may install more chargers than the total power available to you. But then you would downgrade those chargers so that as more people charged in, that charging speed may reduce, but all of the chargers included in on the software will be balanced to make sure that they are operating within the capacity on site. This is really useful when you want to look and think, well, I don't really know what I need, but I know I want and I need to do something. So I'm going to think about doing something that is relatively small and look to grow. And I'm going to use my account manager and my team at Connected Kerb to guide me on that journey. And if we look at the next slide, I can bring that to life for you. So here we've got a just a pictorial diagram of how some charging could look. So we've worked with a local authority, and what we've identified is that they believe that they will need considerable charging in the future, although they're really concerned around the fact that they may put too much in too quickly and alienate those people that don't need a charger. So in this case, when we dug up the roads or we put in the trenching, what we know is that disruption to roads is a very stressful thing for everybody. And therefore, if we can minimize it, then it's absolutely the most sensible thing to do. So in this case, the client needed one charger now. So you can see there that we've got one charger up and running. But we've also got a number of spaces where we've dug out the civils and we've placed the empty box ready for if that infrastructure grows. And so you can see now that the infrastructure's grown. And so somebody's been to site, literally opened the box, placed the component parts in the box, and safely and with this electrification certification, energize those electric vehicles to add to that portfolio. No roads have been dug up, there's no disruption, and commonly, as I said, we can do that within a couple of hours. As well as that, we thought, well, I wonder if our chargers could do anything more to help. And so we've added the ability to add connectivity, whether that be to boost Wi-Fi connection or whether that be to utilize sensors. And for some local authorities, for some customers, those councils are those sensors are all about measuring air quality, so that they can evidence or at least be able to benchmark the difference that that using the electric chargers is. And then in other cases, it may be parking sensors. So actually there's a small amount of space and a customer wants to be able to provide their staff or their visitors or their fleet the opportunity to be able to book their space and therefore manage and maximize the availability of that charger and making sure that those spaces are utilized in the best way. And we've been working across some sites around in the West Midlands to actually bring that to life, so that we're managing not only the fact that we want EV charging, but also the fact that we want to maximize the use of the car parking space. And also we want to penalize those people that potentially park in an EV space when they don't need it, or at the very least be able to understand why they did that. We also want to provide dedicated support from the start. I've been speaking to some NHS trusts, and it's amazing how much they've investigated, how much that they've learned about EV charging. But actually there are concerns that once these EV chargers go in at their trust, that they're responsible for them, and that could be a drain away from away from the actual job, which is keeping people safe and keeping people well. So from day one with us, you'll have all the support you need. If you have a maintenance contract with us, then you get unlimited call outs. We have really quick service levels because we can. We have a nationwide distribution of engineers that can be on site and be able to get chargers back up and running extremely quickly. We also make sure that we give you some people, so a dedicated project and account manager, to make sure that that you've got the support you need. We're the experts here, and we want to be able to tell you what you need to know so that you can rest easy that the decisions that you make are the right ones. And we'll also make sure that every 6 months, or sooner or later, if you don't want to hear from us, we'll just do a review of the charges that you've got, how they're being utilised, if they're being utilised, and that will help us make our next plan around who or what else we may need to get involved if we need to make changes to the forecasted installation. And on the left hand side, you can see the back office software support that you would have available to you. And this is our dashboard that you can provide logins for as many people within your organization. And it gives you just a little bit of information around how your chargers are performing, when they're being used, how much they're being used, the total energy being consumed, how many charging sessions there are. This is really good for curiosity because it helps you to understand what your next steps are. And also you can see there that it tells you around the faults or the connectivity losses that may be registered against your portfolio. And this may come as a surprise because our chargers are always talking to our software. So if it misses a heartbeat from the charger, the software will automatically say, looks like there's a problem with charger number 1. I'm going to raise it as a fault. And then with our maintenance contract, that fault would be fully investigated and resolved. We can also provide you with the reporting that you need. So whilst this is an aggregated view of a number of different charge points, our software allows you to drill right down into each of these reportable volumes. And so it allows you to be able to see via RFID card or via a vehicle, however you want that set up, what charging events have happened and how and when those events happened. And of course, our reporting is compliant with any reporting that you need to provide should you be eligible for any of the grants, especially the workplace charging grant. So I've covered quite a lot off with you today. So just wanted to do a recap around why we think and why we really want to work with you. So the first thing is that we believe our modular system and the fact that we bury the important bits that could get vandalized or could get damaged under the ground to keep them safe. We try to reduce unnecessary road or disruption on the roads by trying to future-proof when we do the initial dig. We give you a project manager and an account manager, and we also work with you to choose the right installation partners for you and for your site. We look at the capacity that you have and what's available, and we provide you short, long and medium term solutions for how you achieve your goals. And we'll also work with the distribution network operator to make sure that when you may be making that application right, and also that we're there to be able to follow up on that and make sure that we get the distribution network operator to do what it has to do for us to move forward. We've got easy reporting, easy billing, and I can talk through how, if you wanted to, you could generate some revenue, whether that just to pay back on capital that you've invested or whether that is to put into future investments. I can talk you through how the trust would get any money back if that was the option that they'd chosen. But don't worry, because if it's not an upfront purchase that you want to make, we have multiple funding options available. I haven't put a slide on those funding options available because it's just done on a one-to-one basis. So we're interested in working with organisations that are interested in what we're trying to achieve, and we'll do everything that we possibly can to make sure that where there's viable projects, we will work and see if funding's required, whether we can help and support, because that's really what we're looking to do. We're unlike others in the fact that we're looking for 10, 15, 20-year contracts so that you guys don't need to worry about EV charging. We pay for it, we maintain it, we market it, we engage with your communities, we engage with your staff, and we are responsible and driven by that utilisation. But we won't penalise you if you don't get that utilisation. That is on us to make sure that we get that utilisation with the teams and the promotions that we would do. So normally I'd have a next step here, but I was told in no uncertain terms by a couple of the NHS trusts, we are too busy to do anything. So please, if you can do it for me, or you can at least start it for me, then that would be really useful. So as such, here, underneath my email address is a link to my calendar. If you or anyone within your trust would like to book some time with me, to tell me about what your ambitions are, what your end result looks like, what good looks like for you, then please just book some time in and we can start those conversations. So yeah, that's it from me today. I have included here at the end, there were too many to mention, so I've just put a few of the ones we're most proud of. But there's our rewards and partnerships and recognition. And there's also some customers that we are already working with. And of course, where it may be that you're looking to just get some support or some guidance before you enter into your projects, then we are really happy to use our existing network to be able to find you, hopefully an existing one of our customers that may be able to talk you through the lessons they'd learned and the things that they wished or did consider when they were doing their project. And the last slide is just about our West Sussex case study. Thousands of charge points, working really closely with the residents and the community, and how we work together to be able to provide this local authority with electric vehicle charging with no upfront costs at all. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'm going to open up for questions. Can I just, so just looking down through some of the chat here, just an easy one here. So we're on all of the frameworks, so recognised by government through their frameworks, that we have the skill set and the governance to be able to provide. So ESPO, NEPO, WIPO, CCS, KCS, and just working with the shared business service on helping them put together for their renewal of their tender expected later this year.
We've got another question here, Vicky, from Martin. He said, given the importance of service availability, particularly for ambulances, what are the panel's thoughts on wireless charging at hospitals? I ask as my company are developing infrastructure to enable this.
Great, thanks, Evie. Well, actually, I've got some experience of wireless charging when I was part of the trial that happened whilst I was at Chargy. And it's really interesting because some of the things that are preventing wireless charging working so successfully right now is the sensitivity of ensuring that the onboard charger directly matches and meets with the wireless charger in the ground. So even a millimeter or a centimeter off, and that charging wasn't working. So I think together with car and vehicle manufacturers, we need to work together to make sure, a little bit like when you, I don't know if you've driven to an airport car park and it tells you move along, move along, move along, or into a car wash until you see on your screen that you're correctly lined up. That's what we need to see moving forward in vehicles, because the risk is that you could pull up for a charge. You think that you've put your vehicle in the right place. You think that it's charging, and actually it hasn't charged at all. So it's definitely on the radar, but needs some more work together with the vehicle manufacturers to make sure that it's fit for purpose.
Thank you for that. We've had another one here from David, which says, does your system manage the physical demands of the car parking spaces, i.e. moving on vehicles that are fully charged to make way for those requiring chargers? He also did ask further down of what is a typical contract period with you guys?
Okay, so there's nothing typical about EVs. But we say that a contract period is really down to the length of time that you're looking to not worry about EVs for, because what we want to do is take that off your hands. So we think that the best way for NHS trusts to get that is to enter into contracts with us with really sensible KPIs and service levels that ensure that we deliver to what you're looking for. So we can sometimes say, you know, if you just want to put chargers in the ground and you want to make sure that they're looked after, then yes, that's great. We can do that, and you can buy our chargers and you can have our maintenance or not. What we think is the best way is to take out longer term contracts that allow you to forget about the maintenance of the chargers and leave it to us, but just secure yourself with some performance things that allows you to still be in control of that contract should we not perform. And then in terms of,
it's probably worthwhile saying just that's exactly the same situation we have with local authorities. They're very nervous about signing long-term contracts, and we've now got contracts with Cambridge, West Sussex, and others that are sort of 20 years plus long, because essentially they have mechanisms within those contracts where if we don't perform, they can kick us out. So you're sort of protected in that sense. Sorry, Vicky.
No, not at all, Chris. Thank you. And we're working with a number of software providers to be able to, so at the very least, our software can notify a user that it's time to move on. It can also, if you want to set it up, that it can penalize users. So if a user hasn't moved on, then you can issue them with a charge. What we're looking to do to develop that further is to work with parking sensors organizations to be able to say, actually, if we can have that the car park managed and the ability for a user to book a space, and then what happens is you can see that the car goes over the sensor, so it then knows that it's come into an EV charging bay. It can then pick up via our software whether a charge has started, and if it hasn't, it can do a number of different things, and that's in your hands. It may be that you want to send that user a polite notification. We think you've entered into a EV space and you're not an EV, or it may be that you want to be able to do something all the way through to issuing a penalty notice. So we're trying to make, go on, Chris.
Just again, sorry to interrupt again. It might just be, so I think Richard Hilson touched on this in the chat as well. As much as we can do all of these things, so we can penalise users, and we've got a project with Coventry Council at the moment where we're deploying parking sensors. alongside the charging points to do all the things that Vicky said. I think one of the key parts that Vicky and the team bring to this is the ability to come and look at your sites. So to come and actually deploy the right charging in the right location, because really we want to avoid penalising people as much as possible, because we don't want to tell someone that actually have to come and move their car after 2 hours when they're midway through a shift doing something really important in the hospital. Their parking should not be the thing that they're thinking about. So instead, actually, as Richard sort of said, you need to get the right blend of charging. Actually, 7 kilowatt charging, when you plug in the morning, you shouldn't have to move your car until you come and finish your shift, and your car should be fully charged by the time you come to collect it. That's where really Vicky was getting at it with the point of the rapid charging. If you put rapid charging in place, you'll actually have the car charged after an hour. There's another, well, ideally another 6 or 7 hours in the shift, realistically another 11 hours in the shift before the person comes and moves their car. So you've got to get the right charging in place, and then you can potentially move away from the sort of the need to penalise. It's really where you've got the wrong charging in place for the dwell time of the vehicles that you really need to penalise. We're not saying we wouldn't engage the workforce or the population that's using them, but if you get the right charging in the right locations, that should be minimal.
We've got another question here, which I think is maybe one for everyone to pose their opinion and answer on. So Simon Brooks has put in the Q&A, I don't understand why we would look to provide EV chargers for staff and visitors to our hospital or community sites. We don't provide petrol or diesel pumps for them. Why is EV any different? So I'll hand this over to you, Chris.
Well, I was going to say I might just start off with a simple statistic, and then Vicky, you can finish off. But the simple stat on this is, I'm not going to sort of talk about the sort of fuel piece because it is different. But the simple thing is that about 62% of the UK population can't charge at home. So the idea of them charging at home, I completely agree with you. That is the whole idea of our business, is we're trying to provide that home charging experience in terms of the convenience, affordability and reliability that gets people to switch. That's why everyone who has an EV today predominantly has a driveway and charges at home. But there is a significant portion of the population who doesn't. So that 62% that I just came up with is not me coming up with a number. That's from the English Housing Survey. And it's actually higher in urban areas. So that's a national average. And that is made up of 34% of the population who doesn't have a driveway and about 28% of the population who has somewhere to park their car, but it's away from electrical connection. So if you look at new build properties or flats, that would mean they'd have a dedicated parking space, but they don't control the land, or they don't have the access to put an electrical charging point in that space. So 62% of the population can't charge at home. So they have to find other places to charge. And I think, as one of the other people sort of mentioned in the chat, there is an opportunity for the NHS and other large places where people park for prolonged periods to be able to provide that service for people, either as profit making or ideally, actually, when we're looking at the transition sort of opportunity, as a way to actually offer cheap and affordable, reliable charging for people when they're at work. Vicky, I don't know whether you have anything to add. I rambled then a little bit, but.
No, I just wanted to add that actually, for the sake of our national grid and for the sake of supply, it's really sensible if we can move people away from the kind of the older fashioned driving home from work, filling up with petrol, filling up with diesel, driving to work. If we replicated that for EVs, then what we're doing is we're putting a real big demand on the grid when it's already under demand. So being able to provide charging facilities for when people are at work or for overnight, what we're doing is we're automatically helping the grid by reducing the demand for it at those key times. And we're also potentially using the cleanest fuel mix that there is. So overnight, we're definitely, you can see, if anybody has seen it, you can now see the fuel mix per every half an hour of the day. And so charging overnight will be the best way for you to have the greenest, cleanest charge, because predominantly it is much more supply via wind. Whereas if you're asking people to potentially charge on their way home, then that's where the national grid is perhaps struggling, and the fuel mix is made up of other types of fuel. Are you okay there, Claire?
Yeah, I was just going to come in on that point, if it was
Thank
okay,
you.
around
Yeah, of
the
course.
charges. Thank you. Can I just say thank you? These questions are fantastic, and these are questions that we're asking as a team all the time. And this is one particular one that's generated a lot of conversation. I think for us nationally, it's not clear what this will look like. There are some really real positives that we can encourage people who are traveling in a sustainable mode, in EV or car sharing, and they could utilize these charges. But then we need the policing around these to be quite good, in terms of we don't want somebody sat in that car space for a whole day taking up a charging spot, which can be utilized by others. And there's also been conversations around how can trusts use this to generate some profits that they could put back into a different form of sustainable travel as well. So I think from a national perspective, it's on our radar, we're thinking about it. It's not clear whether that will be provided, and trusts might take a different approach to this, but it's just a really interesting conversation, and all of this feedback is really helpful to us to hear as well. So thank you for the questions.
Hi, thank you for that, Claire. I did actually have a question for you that was posted early on in the webinar from Craig. He mentioned surely grey fleet is met via home provision rather than public.
Yes, absolutely. So apologies, that was an oversight on my part. Like the statistics that Chris has mentioned, a lot of people won't have access to off-road parking, and so we've got people as well. So some people will have home charging, some people will have driveways and things. People have people who live in flats as well that will have to utilize public provision. So it will be a combination of public and home charging that the grey fleet needs will be met by.
And you face the same problem that many other large fleets have. So we talked to Mighty, British Gas, and all the others, and they've actually recognised this as an employment challenge. So there are employment challenges for staff who don't have the home charging facilities, as in you can't transition them across the green vehicles, because otherwise you're essentially asking them to go and spend an hour more per day to go and actually rapid charge their vehicle or some other sort of form. So I think that's a really, really difficult challenge to try and sort of deal with. Helen's asked a really interesting question around, so what would we do if there's a policy of no EV charging points because there's a power demand issue? The only point I'd say on this is we did a project this year, and Vicky sort of alluded to it. It's called Agile Streets, which is all around the power management capability of the system, with a view to trying to phase shift or to move charging to later times or different times during the day when power's cheaper. Power's cheaper when there's more power in the grid and there's more availability in it. So as Vicky sort of said, we can work with whatever power supply there is. If there's a need to upgrade power, then we can do that. But ideally, what we'd be trying to do is come in under the demands that you've already got, or to work with them. So we've done projects with office buildings, with factories, where essentially you take more power when the building is taking less power, and you reduce the power you're taking when the building's taking more.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Chris. I am going to wrap up there, but first of all, I'd obviously like to thank you, Vicky and Chris, for providing us insight into Connected Kerb and your journey since inception, but also that entire electrification journey. As mentioned at the beginning of this event, the event is being recorded and will be available on our website over the coming days with a full event write-up and all the presentation slides. But before we end today, just want to let you know with what we've got coming up within sustainability partnerships for the rest of this year and going into 2023. So we do have our awards ceremony on the 6th of December. It is free for everybody to attend. This is an online event, and for all those that have submitted an entry, there will be a shortlist announcement next week. Also in December, we do have our full list of events being announced for 2023, and we will be kicking off in January with our sustainability agenda event. So for any NHS employees that we do have on this webinar today, if you are interested in speaking at that event regarding the challenges, your journey so far and what you have planned for 2023, would be great to hear from you. So if you'd like to visit our contact us page, that'd be great. I'd like to finish off really by thanking our partners Connected Kerb, also to Claire and James, and for everybody for attending. So that is everything for today. Thank you, and a full event write-up will be available soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.